Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Southampton, part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. My name is Greg Elliott, and once again today joined by my good friend and wonderful co-host, Zak and Greg. How you doing, Zak?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. I seem to have caught some sort of post-conference lurgy from a work thing I had to go to last week, which is slightly annoying because the weather's been beautiful. But to be honest, it's still not as depressing as loss at the weekend.
Oh, look, mate, I've got a bone to pick with you and Oscar. I leave you alone for one day, and it's all doom and gloom.
It's
There's
not
no
doom. I ended with the positivity of
Your
that it could get better.
If it could be worse is actually what you said, mate. Look, I listen to your episodes when I'm not here, and
what do you want from me? What do you want from me? We lost 3-0, and I know that it was a good Villa side, but we managed to keep it 0-0 for 75 minutes. Then we did a classic Saints and just completely capitulated into the sun for the last 20.
I think that all things considered, there are positives to take from that performance. I know that we've been saying that all season, but you have to put the context in, right? Like,
what, we're bad?
No,
so it's good that we managed to do something.
Yes, that we're bad, but like, we don't have the fitness to compete over 90 minutes. And like you said in the episode, when we bring on substitutes, we make it worse. Like, they brought on Donny Marlon and Ollie Watkins.
Look, as we've discussed, England international previous Champions League finalist, team member. Yeah, I get it.
But look, it was a game that highlighted the goal indifference for sure. But we looked a bit more of a team when we played.
Did we?
Thought so anyway. I felt there were some positives. I agree, there were still some dodgy moments. There were still some mistakes. We still gave away 2 penalties.
We gave away 2 penalties.
Didn't result in goals.
No, well, one of them did because the rest of the team decided to just not clear it. They thought, that is over.
Maybe part of the reason that I'm feeling so positive about the weekend, because the 2 goalkeepers that I have in my fantasy Premier League team, I don't know if you saw the screenshot over the weekend, Zak, are Emi Martinez and Aaron Ramsdale. And I made the standard decision that I, of all people, will make, and backed my team and put Ramsdale on the pitch over Emi Martinez. And that paid off because he saved 2 penalties.
Post-pod,
nothing.
Me and Oscar had a discussion about our fantasy teams, and he said that he set it up at the beginning and hasn't touched it since. And he had one Saints player, which was Sugawara. And I was talking about how I don't think I've had a Saints player in it since Paul Onuachu scored 1 and then another. And then since then, I think I've probably, whereas previous seasons I would put Saints players across the shop, but nowadays we're just not very good, mate. And I'm sorry, I know that you seem to. That might be why you're taking positives, but if you're taking positives from the Saints' performance by the fact that Ramsdale scored 2, saved 2 penalties, we shouldn't have given 2 penalties away.
No,
you were talking about Yanni B on his birthday, on his 250th appearance. You felt he had a goal in him. That's what you felt. And what did he do? He gave away a penalty.
Oh, he knew the second he gave that away what he'd done as well. Never mind VAR. If you can tell the penalty by the look of a guilt on a player's face, and his face went, "Oh no!"
But that's my point. We had a few hairy moments. Okay, maybe we seemed slightly more defensively solid because they didn't turn us over in the first 75.
I think that's all it was. We looked more defensively solid,
a little bit more, but then we still played a little bit Martin ball. Did we not? Did you not see that Jack Stevens clearance that ended up hitting Ramsdale and then went out for a corner? What are they 50? Admittedly, they had about 50 corners. One of the good things is they didn't score off of every single set piece, but I struggle to take a huge amount of positive in the sense that all it for me has done is, as you said, pointed out the massive gulf we've got between the Premier League and the teams at the bottom of the Premier League, right? And as Oscar rightly pointed out, the sheer amount of attacking power that pretty much every team above us has, and we are bringing on a injured, only just recovered Ross Stewart, who, for a guy who we didn't think Paul was going to be our top goal scorer this season, he has been. But now, because of the fact he's playing so many more games than he's used to playing, he's just you can shatter his ankle with the slightest tap.
Even before that, mate, he struggled to make 45 minutes, which goes back to the point we've been making all season about the level of fitness.
I don't understand.
Oscar made a fantastic point on, I think it was on Friday's episode, where it's like, that in itself is partly Russell Martin's fault because his style of play didn't lend itself to fitness being such a focus point. And that's, I guess, where it's
that's if you can keep the ball. Whereas the problem is that the Premier League this year has shown we cannot keep the ball for as long as we think we can. And that was a perfect example of it. Like that game, they were all over us the entire game. Like you were talking about, well, I remember it being a bit better. And then you've looked back at the match stats now and realised that it might have been better in the stadium, but it was shocking.
Look, going off of vibes, it felt better. And then, you're right. I looked at the match momentum graph on the BBC website. Shout out to the BBC. And boy, that's a whole lot of Villa, isn't it? But
is the vibes just because Juric has gone and we don't need to worry about whatever the football that was? But instead, we've fallen back on this weird. This reminds me. This is the parallels between our last relegation and now are just hilarious. Except relegation has now already been confirmed. But it's very much like where we got rid of Hasenhüttl when we brought in Nathan Jones. Nathan Jones tried to do subbing, right? Then we got rid of Nathan Jones and we brought in Sellers to cover that period of time where we kind of played a little bit like a Hasenhüttl ball light. It's just the same thing. We had Russell Martin. We got rid of Russell Martin and we tried playing whatever Juric ball was supposed to be. Apparently, heavy metal football. Didn't see any of that. Barely saw the goals and we leaked to, what was it, like 2.5 goals a game while he was in charge? Something like that. And now we've come back with Rusk and Lallana, who are playing sort of Martin ball light to placate the players who have only learned how to play under Russell Martin. And that's how it will be until the next manager.
I think that's doing it a disservice. I don't think it was quite as bad as that. Look, at the end of the day, we know that our players aren't great, or we wouldn't be the team to be relegated earliest in Premier League history, right? There are bits of hope to hold on to, but honestly, the fact that we held out for 75 minutes against Villa in itself is an impressive feat. We've not got a lot to look forward to the rest of this season, especially when you look at the run-in of fixtures towards the end of the season. Some of these games are going to be brutal, but it gives you some hope that you can hold on in for that period of time. Maybe we can even push and get 90 out of it at some point. I don't know.
That's just the biggest problem. It's complete performances, mate. Holding out over 90 minutes, like, good Lord, it's been a problem with Saints for as long as I can remember. Usually, tell a lie, previously we were able to hold out for 90 minutes. We'd give away the goal in the 93rd was the problem, right?
Yeah.
And that has also happened this season once or twice, like the drawing against Ipswich is the example. But the thing is with that as well is that we held out for 75 minutes, but then saved the penalty. And that should have been should have given them the energy for the last 50 minutes of the game. And what actually happened was it made them go, oh man, Villa are too powerful. And then they scored one.
I just don't think it did, though. I think they did. They did.
We lost 3-0, yeah?
Yeah, yes. But it wasn't the penalty save that didn't give them energy, right? Like, the penalty save put some fire in the team and we went straight up and straight on the attack. And I think we had a chance pretty soon afterwards. And there was genuine belief in the crowd as well, that we were going to fight on and not only get something out of this, but maybe get the first goal. And truth be told, the people around me still didn't think that meant 3 points. But if we get a goal here first, we might get a point, is I think what was said, rather at volume. But
so here you go. So penalty saved, right?
Yeah.
And then there was a corner to Villa conceded by Jack Stevens. The next match event, 2 minutes later, was a foul by Ryan Manning. And then Marlon wins a free kick on the right wing. And then they took that really quick, and that was what obviously resulted in the Ollie Watkins goal. There is absolutely nothing in there about how we even had a strike or an attack. We did what we usually do, which is we probably danced around the box with it, which is why it isn't even worthy of an event. And as I said, I don't want to be so negative. I don't want to be sitting here.
I'm not hearing that, Zach. All I'm hearing is your negativity.
Right, but
we put in a good shift, and we shouldn't be ashamed to be losing 3-0 to that Villa team who are bringing in international quality off of the bench.
As I said yesterday, I always underestimate Villa and forget how good Villa are. But the problem is that
genuine top 4 contenders this season.
A round of applause for a 3-0 loss because it isn't as bad as it could have been is pretty much what we've been doing most of this season. And it's harrowing that is our bar, because our bar now is, well, it could have been 5. And like, that is like blows my mind that's where we're at now. And it's upsetting. And my problem with yesterday, you're saying, oh, well, I'm not hearing a lot of positivity, is I'm trying to look at where the solution is. And we've discussed, like, is it a new manager?
There isn't a solution.
There isn't.
There isn't this season.
But I worry if it's going to be the same next. And this is my concern, is it's getting a bit, because you're like, it seems like so much of it is broken. And you seem to be like, well, no, it's not. So after the break, I want you to tell me what isn't broken and what you think is a solid foundation for us going into next season. That is what I want to hear, because I am struggling to see it myself.
Right.
Maybe I need someone who's happy.
We got this. We'll have a message from our partners, and I'll talk you off the ledge, right?
Your body is unique, and Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimize your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN 2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now. Your body.
Okay, and we are back. Okay, so hear me out. I had a wonderful conversation with Jamie, who sits in front of me at the football, has done for several seasons now. So he's quite used to my opinions and I his. But he had some very good points about going down to the Championship and what we need to do, right? And the answer to me is not, believe it or not, completely build from scratch, which might be a lot of people's answers, right? Because we've not been good enough this season, and there's no excusing that. But instead of buying 10 to 12 players, doing that, we've tried that. That's what gets us to this level we're at now with this bloated squad where, we've got maybe let's be generous and say as high as 6 Premier League quality players, if you're being generous and sticking the word potential in front of some of them, right? That's not good enough for a squad to come off the bench. But spending however much we spent in the last window, we spent about 100 million, right? Something like that, around that. If you put all of the fees in, including Ramsdale, what we need to do is solidly invest in 2 good players, particularly in the attacking area, right? Because what you have to realise is Jack Stevens is probably not going anywhere next season, and that's fine. He's been a bit of a scapegoat. He's been a bit of a scapegoat, perhaps off of his own making, with some of his rash decisions and red cards this season. He's been a little bit unlucky with injury, but actually, when he has been on the pitch, it's been quite difficult to criticise him. He's still in that defence that's shipping all the goals. Sure, it's not very often that he does too much wrong. And at the Championship level, he will be that experienced head and leader that we're going to need. Yanni B is probably going to stick around. He's quite settled. But if he decides to move on, I don't think there will be any negative feel. He's settled. I think he is our best centre-back at the moment. I think that he performs that best every game. And that's the sort of solid line we're building with. But, we might have Harwood Bellis, he might go, that's fine, whatever. We've got options coming back that have had good, solid time away, right? That's going to help us. We've got Shea Charles, we've got Sammy Adozie, we've got other options coming in. We've got the youth coming through. We saw Robinson debut on Saturday, and you said you felt a bit sorry for him to debut in that match, but I just don't think at that age and at that level, I don't think the context of the game matters, right? Getting on the pitch for 10 minutes in a Premier League match, that's big positive energy, regardless of the fact that it's in a 3-0 loss or whatever. And he came on and, he put a boot in and, tried to drive forward a bit, but it's more about the getting over that hurdle of the first time experience and the stuff that comes with that as opposed to anything else. So we're going to have stuff coming through the youth ranks. We've got some players that are going to stick around, I think the key parts of the transfer window are very obvious. First of all, Matty Fernandez, Tyler Diblin. We need to keep minimum one of those two players and use that as the focal point to build whatever strategy we end up leaning in on, right? Because I know that I'm a vocal opponent of philosophy-based football, but you need a base point, right? You can't just play different football every week. You need a base philosophy almost that you pivot your tactics on. That doesn't mean I want to pass the ball about all the time to me. That means, like, you have a style. You still have a style. Even, back in the days I've talked about with these other managers who play the tactical
It's not
game.
being so rigid that you will play it against every single team and not make enough adjustments, right? Like when we spoke about the fact that you thought he was a tactical genius against Arsenal, which we bring up quite a lot, and it turns out that no, he was just accidentally
Didn't
put
have another
two
player,
play-
so
yeah.
just put another left back on the pitch. It turns out that's been, the story of the season. But that in itself
Yeah,
is the base,
I
right?
understand
Play
you.
players in their best positions and build that out to pivot off. So keeping at least one of those two players and building the rest of the squad around that potential is where we need to pivot to. And then we need to heavily invest in a good striker. It doesn't have to be a proven Premier League striker. Not a lot of those exist. But we want to go out and spend more than we would normally spend because, they are a rare commodity and their value is high, a player that will score goals. We need to go out and spend more than we would normally spend on a single player to get a goal scorer in who will score us goals. Because without that, we've got no chance.
So that raised, obviously, we can talk about Russell Martin's team and this and the other for the Cows come home. Like that was a big issue anyway, right? Like there was conversation that's come out now that they did go in massively for Liam Delap, and he's, I won't say paid dividends for Ipswich, but put Ipswich in probably a better position than we are in, not by a lot, but enough that it's not as humiliating as we're in. So, I think that you're right. That's the problem, is that when we came up, we had Adam Armstrong that was one of the top goal scorers in the Championship. They just genuinely, I think, thought that it would be okay without him and Che Adams, and then thought, oh, well, we can bring in Archer to kind of substitute for when he's not having his best game. And I don't even think that realistically Paul Onuachu was even in the plans at all.
No,
I think
100%.
that is pretty much accidental. And
to be clear, both of those players, Adam Armstrong and Cameron Archer, I think, will be very solid forward options in the Premier League. However, what we need is someone to play alongside them because we don't have that option. Like Adam
that's
Armstrong
the problem, though, right?
and arguably Archer are both players that like to run behind opponents. They're both going to be players that are suited to play off of someone who can actually hold the ball up. And now, I don't think Paul can do that. I don't think. Maybe Ross Stewart can do that. But Ross Stewart is not that proven solid quality. We need to bring in someone who can, and who is someone who can score the goals and do that play. And if it's not someone that can hold the ball up, fine, because you're moving away and stepping into not Adam Armstrong and Cameron Archer's strengths, but like Matty Fernandez and Tyler Diblin's strengths, fine, right? I'm not saying that we need this exact DNA of a player, but we need to, we need to put a stamp on it and prove a point that that's what we need, right? I talked quite a lot at the beginning of the season, right, about Ramsdale being like a proper like marquee statement signing. Like this is a signing that means business, that shows that this is a name that shouldn't be coming to Southampton, and we've paid the money that's outside of our normal price range to bring in this player because we genuinely believe we need that quality to improve. And now, sure, right, Ramsdale was a very risk-averse signing anyway, because we're always going to break even on him regardless, right? Another Premier League team will buy Aaron Ramsdale for the release clause of what it is, to break even at the end of the season. So it's good value. But it's still a statement that needs to be made. Like, we need the proper investment and recruitment, and someone that will get proper backing to, because also when you sign that sort of player doesn't necessarily put themselves in a position to hit the ground running, right? They need time to bed in. So we need to get that business done early enough that they get a proper pre-season and make that statement. Like, we cannot head into the new season next year and still be faffing about, who's going to be here, who's not going to be here. Like, obviously that's going to be the case to some degree, but we can't not
Yeah, I get you.
know the key core of our squad, because that's
But
setting
yeah,
ourselves up for failure.
I agree with a lot of your points. To be clear, I think the problem is finding a marquee statement signing when we're going down to the Championship, who is a striker who will be of Premier League quality, is going to be difficult, because if we want a Premier League quality striker who is of a marquee nature, what's to stop any of the other Premier League teams, or specifically the teams coming up from the Championship, to pick that player up instead of Southampton? Because I think that is a fantastic
But no one
strategy.
said it was going to be
after the
easy. I'm just
Championship.
saying it's what we need to do. I know it's difficult, but that's what we
Good.
need, right?
But
Like, if it was easy,
we'd
everyone
already
would be
done
in the
it.
Premier League, wouldn't it? Like,
Yeah,
it's
I think it's. But my thing is that I think those are great strategies for next time we come back up. I worry about what we're going to do next season, because we need to get through the Championship, and there will be a
I
lot
think
of pressure that we come straight back up again. I don't know whether or not that will happen, I think, is my honest assessment.
I think we'll be all right. I think whatever we're left with in the Championship, even with the poor recruitment we've had in the last couple of years, even if we sort of recruit to that level again, which would in itself be a disappointment and a failure, right? Even at that level, we're at least comfortably good and be good enough to get into the playoffs. So I don't think it's,
So
realistically speaking, what we need to do is recruit well enough to be good enough to comfortably win the league. So that's the test. I don't think we're at risk of doing a Luton and being sort of down and struggling, but
hopefully not. But like, that's the thing. You point out, like, we need one or two really good, like, statement signings and stuff. And I was like, we had Matías Fernandes that again flew under the radar early on in the season. I don't know whether it was due to style of play or other bits and pieces that potentially a reason why. And then you've also got, Tyler Dibbling, who's broken through. And as you've seen and reported, those are two players they've basically hedged their bets on being worth a lot more than we've paid for them, and that we could potentially sell them on or develop them for the future. In your head, do those two players not qualify as the two players that could have been that for our season this season? Or is it more of you reckon that they have been targeted specifically for how much money they can make, and the next time it should be for specifically keeping us in the league? Because I still think that it's kind of having the coming into the season with relegation being a foregone conclusion is upsetting for the amount of money or the amount of time wasted on things like marquee signings of Aaron Ramsdale.
yeah. I think that, man, it's hard to think of appropriate terminology for this. I think that having two gambles pay off is not the same thing, right?
Having two gambles pay off is
no
not the same thing as
disrespect
having.
That's no disrespect to any of our signings. All right, Mate Fernandes has been our best player. So once he got properly settled in, he has been our best player consistently this season. And I heard it on the Total Saints podcast. They said it's going to be an interesting battle for player of the season between him and Ramsdale. But for me, it's Matty Fernandes hands down. He puts the entire team on his shoulders and drags them forward, kicking and screaming.
Yeah, there are games that he plays where he has the standout moments. He has the moments where he shoots. He is the one that probably has most of the. I'd love to see the breakdown of how many shots he's had this season in comparison to the rest of the team.
But when we signed Matty Fernandes,
we had no idea.
That was not a statement signing. That was, okay, that's got promise. I would argue that you put Matty Fernandes into the same grouping at the sort of point of signing. You put him in the same grouping as Cameron Archer and Sugawara, right? And Wellington. Because that's, okay,
they might do all right.
That's a player that's got potential. I can see how that would play out. And to be clear, I think all three of those other players named next season still have that potential to come good, right? But that's not a game we can afford. That's not a gamble we can afford to take. I mean, you look at the numbers. You look at how many of those players we signed last season, and let me, talk about the loans. Right, we brought in on loan our two valuable Premier League loan spots. We brought in Ugo Chugwu and Maxwell Cornet. Now, at the start of the season, Ugo Chugwu couldn't get a look in, but through the second half of the season has been revitalised into sort of a very essential part of the team. And Cornet failed to impress in 70 minutes against a championship side, Stoke. So it's...
And it sounds like nobody wanted either of them.
Just because sometimes it sticks to the wall, that doesn't mean that it's what we need again. Yeah? And that, there's a time and a place for it. Not all of our signings are going to be those statement signings, but they need to be the focus of this window because we lack that quality.
Yeah, I guess if it plays out like that and we get some people in where we're like, wow, I didn't expect us to get this person into the championship, right? I'll be really happy. What I am going to be slightly worried if we play gambling a little bit more. But I don't know how much now it's considered gambling with the likes of Spurs behind us rather than the brother of the current West Brom.
Yeah, well, I've got
manager,
some thoughts about that, and we'll move on to them, but we do need to take a break and have a message from our partners at Zencastr. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description and learn more about Zencastr. Okay, so we are back, and you're right, because it's very clear from the outset, from when Sports Republic bought us, that their vision for us and their mission was to take advantage of the sort of reputation we had as a club, where we sign reasonably cheap young players with lots of potential and have more of them hit than miss, and then sell them on for profit. And so I have no doubt also that Spurs will want to approach it that way, and that is probably the long-term vision and the reality that we need to get used to. I don't think that changes my point. Like, I still think we have such a bloated squad at the moment. We need to ship out a lot of it, frankly. We need to trim down. You
right,
of all people, Zach, know that I've been playing a lot of Balatro recently, right? We need to trim the deck and get it into the point where all we've got left are steel king cards to get that high score.
Man, that's going to be a really, really niche reference for some of our listeners. But no, I agree. Like to be clear, from my perspective, the reason that I've been so, I guess, glum about it all is I'm genuinely trying to look at a situation where we get out of this. And the problem is that the Sports Republic also did this once before, where they tried to make some statement signings in the January window when we went down. And that's how we ended up with quite a few of the people now that, are not ideal, as in Solomana and Onuachu.
I think that's so different, though.
No, I understand. I understand it's very different. My problem is that
because
even when we were
a Premier League team, is that what you're saying there is that they were like statement signature signings, where actually what I see them as was panic buys.
Yeah, no, I get that too. But Solomana broke the amount of money. He was like the highest transfer until Ramsdale came in, because we wanted to bring in this quick.
Actually, I think Sulemana stays as our record transfer player, because Ramsdale being our record signing was dependent on us staying up.
But there you go. So and I understand that you think that they're panic buys, and that's probably true. But at that time, we were a established Premier League team that were trying to stay in the Premier League. We are now going down into the Championship.
But you have to remember
and get players to.
You have to remember, Zach, that it was pure panic, right? We have seen that with their management and time to bed in, that the board at that point, the best they had got to was, we've got to fire Russell Martin after that performance because it's ridiculous and the fans have turned. I guess we should write a list of managers we've got to get. That's the same minds in charge, right? As
from
those
that
January
season.
signings.
And also, so why? So
because now we have.
Is it spores that's the difference?
Yeah, I think it is not just spores, but just the step back, acknowledge that we can't approach it that way. We have to have a plan. We have to think it through more. We can't just throw money at it and expect that to be the solution. We need to make good football decisions that are football led. We've set up all of, we have a CEO who is good at the business side of it. The business side of the football continues to improve, and we've got all of these fan engagement events and come and have breakfast with Sammy Saint and in our pub, have a mini tour of the stadium, and that's great. And if we had finished 16th and brought all of these initiatives in,
that'd be seen as good.
Sports Republic would be the heroes of Southampton. They would be seen in such a good light, but it's the footballing decisions that have let them down, but they have acknowledged that. So now we have to hope is probably the only word I've got for it. I don't think we can expect it to be... I don't think we can expect it to be where we think it should be, but we can hope that it will be better than it has been.
So the TLDR is let them cook, and by let them we mean spores and not the people that did it last time, because the people that did it last time made dumb decisions.
Yeah, but and the you and I work in a business where you have to read into the actions of things, right, to get their true meaning, and that's what the firing of Juric was. That was the underlying message. There is, we know it's not been good enough. That decision itself wasn't good enough. What we have now is time to prepare for next season. And that is our only advantage heading in. We have got time to prepare to make this right. So we need to back that up by getting in those signings before pre-season. And one of those signings critically is going to be a manager. Let's be honest. And I think I discussed it with both of you guys last week, and I still don't have a single correct answer in my brain.
There is no correct answer, but it did make me laugh when you said Big Sam.
And you know what? I still wouldn't be. I wouldn't be mad if that's the case, right? It is what it is.
Interesting.
You've done
a better job than I expected you to. I'll give you that, mate. As I said, I think the problem is that my responses are less long term, and they have been quite emotive, because it's, again, like when we watch that Saturday, you're like, man, what have we learned? I'm aware that it's a much longer game, realistically, and it is going to be a much longer game.
But what have we learned on Saturday is something that we knew before the game anyway. We've got a team that can be... right. But we're a team that can be good for an hour, that Villa are a Champions League quarter-finalist, and we are the worst Premier League team in history. So
yeah, no, you're right. It's just really difficult to watch it every Saturday and it not kill me inside a little bit. That's all.
It's fine, mate. There's enough left that we're going to get something.
Really hope so. I really hope so. And if we don't, well, we'll see what happens next season. But I guess at least it's going to be interesting. It's not going to be a boring ride, for sure.
It's never boring as a Saints fan. We like to do things the most painful way possible. That's why we love it.
So
I'm not joking, Zach, when I tell you that I've never comfortably watched a Saints game. Right?
No, I agree. Even that 5-2 at Huddersfield is still like...
As you know, my wife... I'm a big football family, and my wife's a Liverpool fan, and my brother-in-law's a West Brom fan, and so I've been to Anfield and watched Liverpool, and I've been to the Hawthorns to go and watch West Brom, and that is a much more relaxed football experience than any time I've been to St Mary's, because without that vested interest,
I get you.
You get to absorb the game and the atmosphere more, but that doesn't mean that I would change it for the world. That doesn't mean that Saints isn't a better experience for me. It just means that I can't be comfortable.
Man. So there you go. I guess this has been more like our weird philosophy on where the club is, with also kind of talking about the game at Villa being bad.
Yeah.
I have no idea what we're going to name this episode, but it'll be fun when we figure it out. No, I think it's so, mate. And sometimes it's good to have differing opinions on these kind of things, and I think it's interesting either way. And I think ultimately what we both want at the end of the day is to watch Southampton and not feel an extreme amount of pain to the level that we are now. As you said, pain is part of it, but I don't want to go
without the suffer. Right, you don't want to be a team. You don't want to be one of these kids that my kids go to school with, who are like 8 and 9 years old and are Man City fans who are now experiencing their first like bad season.
Yeah, but it's even
football.
Even funnier if they're
makes
Manchester United fans, mate.
The pain makes the enjoyment even better. It's the years of sitting through the pain that makes those days out at Wembley last year so much better.
True.
So you've got to suffer the bad stuff to get to the good. That's just how it goes.
I just wish it wasn't as bad, but hey ho, such is life.
Right, we'll be back tomorrow, where I believe we are going to have a little knockoff of Marvel's What If, because if it works for Marvel, why won't it work for Saints? Until then, thank you very much for listening. Hit us up on all the socials, and we will see you then.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.